In the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, Massachusetts, there is a very famous painting done by the post-impressionist Paul Gauguin. The painting, which he said had, on a number of occasions was his very best work, had a title which was actually given in the inscription Gauguin wrote in the upper left-hand corner. And the title was given in the form of 3 questions. It was written in French, and in English it translates as follows. Where do you come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do you come from? A question of our origin. What are we? A question of our identity. Where are we going? A question of our purpose, or better still, our destiny. Now, admittedly, these are big questions which we would all do well to think through and answer, and perhaps the earlier we answer them, the better. However, if I could, I'd like to suggest another question which could have just as easily been asked by Gauguin, which humanity has struggled with throughout its history. And that question is essentially, why do you worry about your life? And the question, why do you worry about your life, was asked by a man named Jesus in a kind of TED talk that he gave about 2,000 years ago. Why do you worry about your life? Why do you go to pieces, which is the idea that Jesus is expressing? Why do you let your mind concentrate on concerns, whether real or imagined, in your life to the point where it makes you sick, stressed, depressed, afraid, and so on? Why? Well, his argument is as follows. If the securing of wealth, money, is your highest priority, because you think if you have enough of it, all your worries will be removed, think again. Money can't do that. It may give you a moment of peace, but it will be a fleeting moment. He goes on. So let me tell you, don't worry about your life, what you'll eat or drink, or about your body, what you'll wear. Then he gives his listeners an assignment. Look at the birds of the air. They don't sow, they don't reap, they don't store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Then he asks a couple of questions. Are you not much more valuable than they? And can any one of us, by worrying, add a single hour to our life? He concludes by saying, don't worry. Don't worry, saying, what shall you eat, or what shall you drink, or what shall you wear? Because pagans run after those things. And your heavenly Father knows that you need them. And then he ends, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. In essence, the best we can do as humans is about 60 seconds a minute. Some of the words of Jesus from a talk he gave. Now, clearly, worry and anxiety have confronted humanity all throughout its history. The question, am I going to be okay? Am I going to make it? As I live in this body on this earth, in the place that I am, will I have enough? Those questions for so many are haunting questions that they cannot shake from their minds. And more than likely, each of us here on some level deal with them. What if I get sick? What if I get in an accident? What if I don't get accepted into university? What if I do get accepted? How will I pay for it? What if something bad happens to my parents, to my family, to me, to my home, across the street or around the world? Then what? And this will not come as a shock to most of you. However, worry has become an American pastime. And for many people, worry has become so ingrained in their psyche, in their thinking, that once the old worries are gone, it's pretty easy to have new ones be plugged right in. And because worry can have such a tight grip on one's mind, it would almost appear like if you don't worry, it must mean that you don't care. Or the reverse, you don't really care if you don't worry. I mean, I can imagine those things are said when kids and parents have those money talks around the kitchen table. And why would we let that line of thinking hold sway to our future planning and in our daily living? Why would we do that? Not so long ago, the New York Times reported on a survey released from the American Psychological Association entitled Stress in America, How We Are Paying with Our Health. It began by saying, this is what we worry about: money, work, economy, family responsibilities, personal health concerns. Sound familiar? No real surprise. This is the stuff which Jesus said made up our life. And then they said, here's how worry affects our health. And if you're a student, I bet some of this will ring true to you. Irritable, angry, nervous, anxious, lack of interest, lack of motivation, overwhelmed, dizzy, stomach pains, fatigue, sleep deprivation, headaches, depressed, sad, panic attacks, and screaming at your parents. I just added that one. Martin Lloyd-Jones, who was the youngest physician to serve the British monarchy in the early part of the 20th century, left his very successful medical career and became a pastor. He became a pastor in part because he became wearied and saddened that the majority of his patients' sickness had more to do with their minds and their thinking than with their bodies and how they were living. And in this, worry and anxiety was one of the chief causes. So may I suggest to you, while worry can become one of the lenses through which people view their life, to be sure, worry can also, and this isn't good, worry can also easily become the framework by which people actually structure and plan their life. And just think of the creative potential in a person, in you, which is being sat on and sacked just because of worry. Just because your mind is going to pieces on things real or imagined. You see, I suppose Jesus understood this when he asked the question, why do you worry? And then later on when he said, do not worry. Now, are there reasons to be worried today? Many people would say there is. However, were there any more reasons than in the time and place Jesus lived? Not really. In fact, you could easily make the case in terms of economic concerns, in terms of health concerns, health care, in terms of safety, social unrest, the lack of social programs to aid people, that they, in their time and in their place, had a much larger potential to be worried than we do in our time and in our place. So the problem is pretty clear. We worry a lot. And how the human condition may very well need the medicine that Jesus is giving in his talk, in this big idea, do not worry about your life. Now, one of the things that Jesus said to help us see why we need not worry is to look at the birds of the air. In fact, when he says, look at the birds of the air, it's actually written in the form of a command. It's like, do this, study birds. So I did it last Thursday evening. Thursday evening when I was curled up in the fetal position, worried about the talk. But that's something I need to deal with. And so what I did was I found out a few things I'd like to pass on to you about birds. First, in the science section of the New York Times, October 27th, I read of the bird called the common swift. And the common swift, which weighs about 1.5 ounces, biologists confirm can spend up to not 1, not 2, not 5, but 10 months in the air without landing. It can eat in the air, it can mate in the air, and they even have the data which showed that the common swift can fly up around 1.5 miles, catch a bit of sleep while they use the current in the air to keep them afloat as they glide. 10 months, think of it, 10 months. Flying around, eating, sleeping, and that other thing. You see, look at the birds. And to help us know that Jesus is not promoting a life of irresponsibility or a life of no planning or no anticipation or a life not lived for the common good, I also discovered in my studies that birds feed themselves. In other words, the bugs just don't crawl in their mouth. The birds do the pecking, and they do the picking, the forage. The final thing I discovered was more like I remembered a poem written by a lady named Elizabeth Cheney entitled Overheard in an Orchard, which my wife asked our kids to memorize when they were young. And the poem goes like this. Said the robin to the sparrow, I should really like to know why these anxious human beings rush about and worry so. Said the sparrow to the robin, friend, I think that it must be that they have no heavenly Father, such as cares for you and me. Look at the birds. And with that, let me end by saying this. What Jesus is expressing in his big idea when he asks the question, why do you worry, is something like this. Listen, you worry because you're taking on way too much responsibility. You were not meant to be all-sufficient. You were not meant to be self-sufficient. You were not meant to live and think that everything is up to you and that your well-being is all in your hands. No. But you were made, in part, to be cared for. So let me care for you. Therefore, Jesus says, you be you, and I'll be me. You are like the birds. Me, like the bird feeder. And maybe, just maybe, all those other things we look to, money, power, influence, education, institutions, and so on, things we look to give us the peace and security and the sense of well-being we all desire, maybe we have given them an authority and a function, or even godlike power that they should not have in our lives. So I will stress myself out to the max and put in and throw myself in those institutions and those arrangements or try to secure those provisions, and they better take care of me. They better make me not worry. But may I suggest this, that an objective person would be honest enough to say they can't deliver those things. They can't do that. We all know what it is to worry. It hurts more than it helps. There is no real virtue in it at all. But is it possible not to worry? Well, let me end by telling you what my son wrote 2 years ago when asked the question at our church's graduation party for the graduation class of 2014. The question was this: what is a favorite memory of yours growing up? This was his answer. Frankly, I don't have a favorite memory. Rather, I have a favorite childhood feeling, which is the feeling of not having any worries or cares about my future. So you see, either this big idea, which is not my own, which I'm trying to spread, is some kind of terrible joke, or it has a ring of truth to it. You're sensible people. Judge for yourselves what I'm saying. Thanks so much for your attention.